Hi, my name is Mandy. This is Evie, and today we are going to be filming my June wrap-up. Are you excited for it, Evie? Yeah, what did we read this month, huh? Let's get to it. This month, I read 10 books. Whew. I know that last month I promised that if I'd read too many books that I would... Oh my gosh. Evie just opened a door for the first time. Guys, that was literally the first time she's ever opened a door. She did it on camera, kind of. The door opened. You can see the door open on camera. Luckily, the door has a lock, and I can just turn that on, and she is stuck with me. Anyways, I know that I promised that if I had read a lot of books that I would do a mid-month wrap-up this month, but mid-month, it didn't seem like I'd read that many books, and then all of a sudden I got to the end and said, oh, I read 10. Sorry about that. I'll also apologize about my background. We are moving, so we are in the process of packing, and this box is part of that. It also blocks the bookshelf so that Evie doesn't pull all my books off. It gives me this nice little armrest. I like the armrest. We're gonna go in order of when I read these books. I was going to go in my order of least favorite book of the month to most favorite book of the month, but then I read a sequel to a book that I read this month that I rated lower than the first one, and I thought it might get a little confusing if I talked about the sequel first. The first book that I read was The Devouring Gray by Christine Lynn Herman. This book has been going around BookTube a lot recently, so you probably have heard it if you're watching my tiny channel. Basically, you have a town that is plagued by the Devouring Gray. It is a kind of monster that lives in an alternate dimension, and there are 4 founding families who are tasked to protect the town from the Devouring Gray. This year, there have been more deaths than usual in the Gray, and people are starting to worry. Especially a guy named Justin, who's one of the 4 founding families, but he failed his initiation, which means he doesn't have any powers, but the town doesn't know he failed, and so they think that he should be helping even though there's nothing he can do. You also follow Violet, who has moved into town. Her mom, who grew up there, and they're moving back. She doesn't know anything about her heritage, and she starts to discover that when she comes to town. There's a girl named Harper, who's one of the other families. She failed her initiation as well, and so she is seen as a pariah because everybody knows that she failed her initiation. Then you've got Isaac, who is troubled and quiet. You don't really learn too much about him in the beginning of the book. He's just kind of a presence there, but he's from the 4th founding family. Now, once they all meet, they have to come together to find a way to combat the Gray, to figure out why things are going wrong and what they can do to stop it. This is the first in what is going to be a series. I rated this book 4 stars. I enjoyed it. It felt like a CW show, and I like CW shows. I don't take them very seriously, but it's fun to watch them in the moment. I definitely enjoyed it, and I will be continuing on with the series. The only thing that I didn't fully like was that it felt like every single character was bisexual, and it almost seemed like they're setting up for like a love pentagram. Hey guys, Editing Mandy here. I meant pentagon, not pentagram. I don't even know. And that's just not something that I feel like reading. So that's why I docked it down a star. I still enjoyed it, and it didn't get in the way of me liking it, but still not quite 5 stars because of that. The next book that I read was Devil in the White City by Erik Larson. This is a nonfiction book, and it didn't fulfill the requirements for my nonfiction book. I may have to stop recording until after she's a nap. I know that's what I usually try to do, but I just wanted to get this done. I wanted to start editing this when she was in her nap. Okay, so this book combines the stories of the Chicago World's Fair of 1893 and H.H. Holmes, who was a serial killer operating in Chicago during the time of the fair. The paths of the creators and Holmes never crossed, but the story is woven together really well. We get to see all of the struggles that came leading up to the opening of the fair, all of the hardships. Okay, Evie's going to be holding the book for me. Now we also get to learn all about H.H. Holmes, who built the World's Fair Hotel leading up to the start of the fair. It became known after it came out that he was a serial killer as his murder castle. He built a lot of things into it that helped him to kill people easier. How pleasant, right? I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars. Larson did a really good job of creating a narrative and a story when it comes to these events. I became interested in not just the parts about the serial killer, but also about the parts that described what happened leading up to the World Fair. I thought that I would be bored by all the architecture talk, but I definitely wasn't. The only problem that I found with this book is that H.H. Holmes' story did not end with the end of the World's Fair. His story kept going, and because they were going simultaneously, I thought that his ending was rushed just a little bit. It was kind of all shoved into one chapter as we learned what happened to him at the end. The next book that I read was Before the Devil Breaks You by Libba Bray. This is the 3rd book in the Diviners series. I won't say much about it because it is the 3rd book in the series, but this book was a lot of lead up to what the final conflict is going to be in the 4th book that comes out next year. Okay. It might be time to call it quits. My goodness, it wasn't even time for her nap. She was just being ornery. I gave her a snack. Let's hope that she's okay. I rated this book 3.5 stars. I liked the story and I liked the bits of back pieces that we learned, but it wasn't, oh my gosh, this is amazing. My biggest issue with this book is probably going to end up being my biggest issue with many books in the future. It took a hard turn towards smutty for me. It was a lot more sexually charged than any of the previous books, to the point where there was one section where 4 separate characters all had sex or did something sexual within like a 30-page span. And that's just not for me. That's not something that I enjoy reading. The next book that I read is probably one of my favorites of the month. It was my first 5-star review of the month. My husband and I took a little road trip when we were up visiting my parents, and we listened to this on our road trip. It is Renegades by Marissa Meyer. I thought I would like this book. I mean, it's superheroes. Both me and my husband enjoy superheroes, but I didn't know how much I was going to love this book and how much I would be engaged. So to give you an idea of this book, it's a world like ours, but only everyone has powers. In the past, people with powers were dissected and used as science experiments. That was until Ace Anarchy started in and started the Age of Anarchy. As you can probably guess, there was anarchy during the Age of Anarchy. Who would have guessed, huh? At a certain point, a group of people called the Renegades stepped in to end the anarchy and establish some order. Now Nova, she's our main character. She lost everything because of the Renegades. I won't go into detail. I'll let you figure out what happened yourself. All you need to know is basically Nova hates the Renegades, and she is part of a gang called Anarchists, who were Ace Anarchy's gang. There's a lot of gangs though, it's not just them. To take down the Renegades, Nova decides to go undercover and become one herself. That's where she meets Adrian. Adrian is actually the son of one of the founding members of the Renegades, and they come together. Nova has to battle what she's always believed and the feelings that she's beginning to have. Not just romantic feelings, just feelings of friendship for the people that she's meeting in the Renegades. But also she's in danger because her villain alter ego is still wanted. As I said, I rated this 5 stars. I loved it. I was not prepared for how much I was going to love this book. Evie found one of those things on the back of the door that makes that sound. I'm sure you can guess what it was. I'm just gonna let her keep playing so that I can get on with this. Hopefully it's not too distracting. The world in this book was so fascinating. I loved hearing all about the Renegades. I loved hearing about the different superpowers. There really were some unique superpowers that you don't see every day in a Marvel comic or a DC comic. I liked the characters, all of them, on the villain side and on the renegade side. They were all fascinating. I'm not gonna lie, I am definitely shipping Adrian and Noah very hard. Adrian, he is so innocent and optimistic. He's a little clueless, but in a cute way. And I am ready to read Arch Enemies. I'm just waiting for it to become available from my library. The next book that I read was A Darker Shade of Magic by B.E. Schwab. Picture a world where you all basically have 4 different dimensions. They all have the same geography as our world. The only central point is the city of London. The Londons don't always look the same, but they're all called London in every single world. Now you have Grey London, which is actually our world, Red London, which is the world where the main character is from, White London, and Black London. Black London is actually bad. Black London got so bad that they sealed off the worlds from everyone else. It used to be that people could go through doors to get to each world, but they closed all the doors and cut off Black London. The only people that can get through to the other worlds are Antari. And Kel, our main character, is an Antari. He basically acts as an ambassador between the leaders of each world, aside from Black London, which no one goes to anymore. In addition to being the ambassador for all the different worlds, Kel is also a smuggler. It is illegal to bring things from each different world across, but of course, Kel does it, and one day he is tricked into bringing across a piece of black magic from Black London. The only way to get rid of the dark effects that come as this is released onto the worlds is to somehow get it back to Black London. Along the way, he meets a girl named Lila, and together they have to work to get the piece of Black London back to Black London. Of course, it's not as easy said as done. There is a lot of conflict and trouble that goes on in the middle. I love this book. I rated it 5 stars. It was my second 5-star read of the month. People love this book, and for good reason. I'm so glad that I stepped out of my comfort zone to read an adult fantasy. I've had such a hard time reading books 5 stars this year, and I actually had 3 of them just this month alone. That's 3/4 of my 5-star reads for the full year. The next book that I read was a little bit more of a disappointing read. It was Until Friday Night by Abby Glines. This book is a contemporary. It's about a girl who 2 years before the events of this book, she actually witnessed her father murdering her mother, which is so traumatic. And because of that, she actually closed up and she hasn't talked since. For 2 years, she has not said a word out loud. She moves in with her aunt and uncle to a new place where no one knows her, and she starts trying to get used to this new place, have people get used to the fact that she doesn't talk. She meets West. Now West, he's golden boy, everyone loves him at school, only his dad has cancer and he hasn't told anybody about it. Both of their lives are falling apart. Can they pick up each other's pieces? I don't know. In all honesty, I only gave this a 2-star review. I mean, I was expecting something on the intense side of things. The backstories of these 2 characters are both very intense. The story did not flow like I thought it should. When it came to her talking for the first time, it happened a lot easier than I thought was realistic. And to be honest, their relationship turned into something very unhealthy. They did acknowledge that the relationship was unhealthy, but it seemed like a quick fix after that, saying, oh yeah, we acknowledge that it's unhealthy, so all of a sudden that makes our relationship healthy? That's not how it works. Overall, I thought that it would be a good, intense read, but it fell short for me. The next book that I read was The Crown's Game by Evelyn Skye. I was excited to read this because the author's name is Evelyn. Evelyn is Evie's full name, so I guess I feel a little bit of a kinship to the name. This book is set in Russia in the 1820s. You have Vika and Nikolai, they've been training their entire lives to be the Imperial Enchanter, the Enchanter of Russia. It is a very big political position, and you get to use magic to better your country. The only problem is there can only be one enchanter. Basically, the enchanter pulls off the power of Russia itself, and if there are two people pulling off the power, they are not as powerful. So they have to do what's called the Crown's Game. Basically, a fight to the death. They each get 5 turns to show a big show of magic, and at the end, the winner becomes the Imperial Enchanter, and the loser burns up in fire. Very pleasant, right? Now, of course, they're going to start falling for each other. I mean, if you find someone who's got power like yours, why not fall for them, especially if your love is doomed? But I loved this book. This was actually my 3rd 5-star read of the month. It was giving me Night Circus vibes. It was very engaging. I loved the build-up and I loved the ending. I thought that the ending was very beautiful. All in all, it was a great read. The next book that I read was 5 Feet Apart by Rachel Lippincott. The main reason why I read this is because the movie recently came out, and I'm a little bit of a sucker for Cole Sprouse's smile, at least since Riverdale. I didn't know that he was attractive until he was on Riverdale. Anyways, I want to watch the movie because he's in it, but I have a thing where I cannot watch a movie until I've read the book. Our 2 main characters in this book are Will and Stella. They both have cystic fibrosis, which basically is a disease where your lungs fill up with liquid and make it really hard to breathe. That's a really vague generalization of it, so if you know more about it, I'm sorry if I got it wrong. Now it's actually time for her nap, so we're gonna get her to bed. Okay, so I am back now. It is another day. Evie did not want to go to sleep for nap, so that kept me from making the video, and then things got crazy, so I did not get to finish it yesterday, but I am here to finish it today. Because of the different bacteria cultures that are in each person with CF, they cannot come within 6 feet of each other. That's anyone with CF. It could kill them, but Stella especially does not want to get close to Will because he has a very specific type of bacteria that is terminal. There's no going back once he catches this bacteria, and he can give it to her, which would kill her. This bacteria essentially bans him from the lung donor list. He will never be able to get a new lung, and at this point, Stella still is eligible for a new set of lungs. Stella is very meticulous. She is always working hard to keep herself alive for her parents. She is living for her parents, and Will has essentially given up. His mom is fighting, putting him into trial after trial, and he doesn't want the trials anymore. He is just waiting for the day that he turns 18. Well, Stella sees him not trying, and it bothers her, and so she makes him start to try, and they do their treatments together. From 6 feet apart, of course. There is a romance that blossoms, but it is doomed because they cannot touch each other ever without fear of killing the other. I rated this book 4 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed it a lot. I knew when I got into it that I was not signing on for a happy contemporary novel. That much was certain with the description. But rather than a book like The Fault in Our Stars, where you just feel dead inside, you're crying afterwards in a good way, this book made me feel hopeful with the ending. I enjoyed it a lot. I really enjoyed Will and Stella and their relationships. It kind of stressed the point that you do not need physical contact to have a meaningful relationship. The next book that I read was The Crown's Fate by Evelyn Skye. That is the 2nd book in the Crown's Game series. And since it is a sequel, I will not say much about it because I don't want to give away any spoilers. I did rate this book 3 stars. It really was just a middle of the road sequel. There wasn't anything too amazing or too bad about it. I will say that the story did veer to places and events that I didn't really care for. It wasn't anything too bad, but it wasn't anything too great. And I don't know. I love the Crowns game, and I honestly, even though it did end on a little bit of a cliffhanger, I think she could have left it at that book and this book still have been fulfilling. The next book that I read, it is the last book. We finally made it to the end. The last book was Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. This is a sequel to Six of Crows, which I read last month. I'll just say this book was a wild ride. There were twists and turns in a good way, and I was engaged after about the first third. The first third was a little bit slow for me, but after that it picked up and I just kept reading and reading. But that is why I only rated it 4 stars rather than 5. I enjoyed the storyline and I enjoyed getting to know our characters a little bit better. I thought it had a good and fitting ending. We did get to see some side characters from the Shadow and Bone trilogy, and it was nice to be able to see them again. I will say, and I hope this isn't quite a spoiler, one thing that did rub me a little bit the wrong way was that there were 6 characters, so 6 of Crows, 6 people in their little gang, and they all paired up nicely. Each one had a romance with the other, and that just felt a little bit unrealistic with me, that it was a perfect 6 for 6 romance pairing up. I don't know. If all 6 of them had had a love interest, it would have been different as long as someone had a love interest outside of the group. But that's just me. You may like that, how everyone pairs up very nicely together. Anyways, that is what I read in June. I was actually really surprised that I was able to read quite so much. I was on vacation for the first half of June, and I only read a handful of books while I was away. Actually, it was audiobooks because I like to listen to audiobooks while I'm getting ready for the day and just in the background while I'm eating breakfast, so it's a lot easier to get through audiobooks than it is to get through a physical book. I was able to get through one physical book while I was gone. It was audiobooks that I mostly read this month. But I am glad to be back. I am glad we are moving and that I will soon have a wonderful place to film my videos. Anyways, what did you read in June? Did you guys have a good reading month as well? Let me know in the comments. What about the books that I read? Have you guys read them? Did you have similar thoughts to me? I would love to hear your thoughts on my thoughts, if that makes sense. It doesn't really make sense, does it? If you liked what you saw today, feel free to click subscribe. You can also follow me on my social media, which I will link below. I hope that you are having a great summer, and make sure to have a great day.